Alright, I'm going to title this video, Why Some People Must Burn in Order to Learn. Sounds pretty harsh, right? And it is harsh, but in the end, it's for the better, and I'm going to tell you why. But of course, I gotta go back and share a backstory. Something that a lot of you guys do not know about me is that as a child, I had a fascination with fire. I would always play with fire. Fire was beautiful, captivating, amusing to me. I would say between the ages of 4 and 7, my mother and 2 of her sisters all lived in a row house together with all their children. In this row house, we didn't have a good central air system. So when winter and fall came around, it was very common for my family to turn on the oven or turn on all the burners on the stove to heat up the house. And let me tell you, every chance that I had to get to the stove, to look at the fire, to play with it in my own way, I did. My mother caught me playing with fire, and she would scold me and tell me, no, do not play with fire. That's a no-no. She would slap my hand, and I wasn't getting it. I didn't understand. I'm a baby still, you know. I remember my aunt being home, the aunt who used to keep us the most. I believe my mom and my other aunt, they were out working, and I don't really remember where the rest of the kids were. It seems as if that particular day I was the only one home, but I'm sure there were others home, and I'll tell you why. But this particular day, my aunt had the oven on, and she had the oven door down, again, to heat up the house. In my mind, I don't know what I was thinking, there were canned goods on the kitchen counter. So I got the bright idea to get a can of beans, and I put it in the oven and closed the door and went upstairs as if nothing had happened. And about 5-6 minutes later, there was a loud boom, and my aunt ran downstairs to see what was going on, and I followed behind her, and the can of beans exploded in the oven. Beans were everywhere. It blew the door open, but half of it came off the hinge. And I remember, this is why I know there were other people in the house, I remember my aunt asking who did it, and I remember saying, I don't know, I didn't do it. My mom came home and she knew who did it because, again, I had a history of playing with fire and messing with the stove. But because she couldn't really prove it, I didn't get in trouble and I didn't get a spanking. None of us did. But my mother told me, if it was you, I told you, do not play with fire. And so, again, it didn't really sink in. So what ended up happening, my mother eventually moved out of the townhouse and got her own apartment. My mother's boyfriend at the time was a cigarette smoker. And I found some matches of his. I remember seeing him striking with the matches with the fire. And so I got the matches and I went in the kitchen and I started trying to strike the match to get fire. I struck the match and I wasn't getting anything, and then I would say about the third try, the match lit and I felt the little heat on my fingers, and I threw it, and when I threw it, part of the match caught on to the kitchen curtain. The kitchen curtain started to catch fire, and I just panicked and I ran in the living room and told my mom, the kitchen curtain is on fire. And my mom ran in the kitchen and she put the fire out. And she saw the match on the floor. She knew I was guilty. My mother said, didn't I tell you not to play with fire? You want to play with fire? You want to let me show you what fire can do? My mother turned on the burner on the stove, and she took my hand, and she put my hand just close enough where I could really feel the heat, like I've never felt it before, but not close enough to really burn me. And let me tell you, I will never forget that. My tender young skin feeling that heat. If you can imagine having thicker skin, literally and figuratively, as an adult, if you put your hand near fire, it's pretty intense. So imagine from a child with very sensitive skin. Now, my mother didn't burn me, and I totally got why she did it, and it worked because After that day, I never played with fire again. Had my mother not done that, based on the trajectory that I was on, I would have caused the fire and could have ultimately caused the loss of some lives, including my own, or someone else's life, including my own. So my mother had to do something very drastic for me to get it. She literally had to make me feel the burn to learn. Now, here we are years later, older, been through a lot, have seen a lot, have learned a lot, have observed a lot. And what I have learned and have observed and experienced over and over again is that this very same metaphor is being played out in so many different parts of each of our lives. How many times have we been told by someone who is wiser and older, who have been down the path that we're going, to not do something because it would be a detriment and it leads to a path of misery, strife, and suffering. But somehow we just throw caution to the wind and we do it anyway. Now, I'm not saying that we are not entitled to make mistakes, but here's the thing. When we are forewarned and given advice and instructions and wisdom, and we go against that and experience what we have been warned against, and we feel the burn, the hurt, and misery, okay, we can charge that one to the game. Because, especially when we're young, we think that we're invincible. And so we will try our hand and end up getting burned. I can get that. But what happens if we feel the sting of the burn as the result of not making the best choices and end up burning again? The second time we don't learn from our mistakes, that burn is going to be more intense. And you would think by the second burn, by the second mistake that has brought us pain, strife, misery, and suffering, we will not go down that path or make that choice again. But a lot of us keep right on doing it. And when we do it, what do? We get angry and want to blame God, blame it on the devil, or we blame it on a mother, blame it on a boyfriend, or we're blaming everybody but ourselves. I see so many of us making the not so best choices with mates, making the not so best choices in how we treat one another. When we treat one another a certain kind of way, there is a boomerang effect, whether you believe in it or not. Treat others the way you want to be treated. You know why? Because the way you treat people is ultimately the way we are going to be treated. And how many of us have experienced that, but yet we keep right on inflicting harm and misery and doing things to other people, loved ones, that we wouldn't dare think of someone doing to us and our loved ones. And when it comes back, we want to act like somebody has done us wrong. We have not stopped to think about what we have done to someone else, the person that we may have caused great strife and misery to. When I was working in the secular world, I would see a lot of these managers and these supervisors who would do some very dirty, cruddy, and underhanded stuff on the job. Now, these people are not stopping to think that, you know what, there may come a day where I'm going to be on the receiving end of this, or maybe my daughter or my son, what I'm doing to somebody else's son, daughter, or child may come back to me. They're not thinking about that. And without fail, it comes back home. It's not a good feeling to see someone you love and care about being hurt and done wrong, cheated, denied, oppressed, abused. So why are we surprised when the tables are turned? But again, some of us still don't get it and continue to do the same things over and over and over again. Some of us won't learn the errors of our ways until we are caught up in an inferno, and literally we have totally destroyed ourselves, meaning physical death. We can't carry or take with us the material things, but we do take with us the energy streams that we've created, the things that we've done to other people, the ripple effect that we created in our respective lives. We carry that along with us, and that comes over into our next life. And so here's why a lot of us are in a world where there's so many fires, wars, famine, disease, poverty, drama, murder, mayhem. And we are burning in a metaphoric hell. You guys get where I'm going here? This here is hell, and all of us are burning to some degree so that we can ultimately get to a place where we have learned our respective lessons, finally. Now, the unfortunate thing, I hate to say, is that some of us simply will not learn. If we have been given hundreds and thousands of cycles and we have not evolved and have not learned from our many incarnations of burning, we have practically doomed ourselves, and we can't blame no one but ourselves when it's all said and done, because we have a choice. And this is the danger of externalizing our problems and our power. As long as we continue to blame other people for our problems and the choices that we make, we won't learn. We won't grow. As long as we don't take accountability, we won't make a change. We will not rise up and do better and become the gods and goddesses that we are here in training to do and be. You see? So that proverbial statement of treating others the way you want to be treated, the way you want your son, your daughter, your husband, your wife, your grandmother, your mother, if you want them to be treated with respect, kindness, and be given courtesy, honor, you have to practice what you preach. If you don't want pain, misery, and suffering in your life, stop repeating the patterns that you have already felt the burn from over and over and over again. Take responsibility. Take accountability. Now, I had done a video where I talked about what happens after we die. And there's so many different layers, again, I didn't go into because I didn't want to make that video too long. But one of the things I said in the video that I really didn't give a lot of attention to is that there are other life forms and beings who trick some of us into incarnating into dense matter again. When I said that, I'm not talking about people who made a few mistakes. I'm not talking about people who have not learned their lessons, people whose mind is really imbalanced and corrupt and cannot access frequencies and realms of consciousness where there's harmony. Those beings have to incarnate because they are not ready to move forward. I am talking about those of us who are not necessarily inflicting harm on others, but we are not taking personal accountability. We are depending on someone else or blaming someone else. We are externalizing our power. Those of us, we don't necessarily have to reincarnate in dense matter, but when we go over into the non-physical realms and we come across these beings who can fool and deceive us, they can trick us into reincarnating in physical matter. And this is allowed. Why? Because they too have free will. No one can come in and make us see the error, because I can tell someone all day long that, look, when you are done with the physical body and you go over into the non-physical realms, there are beings there who will pretend to be your savior or your God, who will manipulate you and trick you into incarnating into dense matter, although you really don't have to. I can tell them till I'm blue in the face. If they're not going to receive it, they're not believing in it, then they have to experience it and go through the burn. You see? So some of us have to keep going through that cycle until something finally kicks in the core of feeling that sting for so long and so many cycles that something clicks in your conscious mind. Wait a minute, this isn't right. No, wait a minute. You start to get it. Why? Because you have gone through the burn so many times and the sting is there and it is so strong and powerful and stuck in your core. You just have an inner knowing to not repeat this pattern. And so therefore you have learned your lesson. The reason why we have to feel pain and feel misery and suffering sometimes is because this is the only way we're going to learn our lesson. This is the only way to make a real sting on the core essence, to impress upon us, to have a real, to make all of those life lessons really stick, to make an everlasting impact on our multi-dimensional layers, our multi-dimensional bodies, in a way that we will never forget, not just in the experience, but the feeling. The knowing helps to shape the wisdom. Remember, we are experiencing the Almighty's knowledge from as many angles and perspectives until we reach perfection. To have a real deep soul-stirring impact, to stop repeating those dangerous, hurtful, painful paths, those painful cycles. And it is from this that we become empowered, we become stronger, more resilient, and evolved. Remember, for each time we repeat the same cycle, that heat is going to become more and more intense. Alright, that's going to wrap it up for me. Just some food for thought. Please rate, share, and comment. And until the next time, immeasurable love.